never feel like I am very good at titling sermons. But I will admit that on this one, the title seems pretty obvious. I really want to call today's sermon Nick at Night. But I won't because it's a really bad pun, and also because my kids don't know what I'm talking about and they say that makes me sound old. So just forget that. That won't be the title for today. I'll come up with a new one. But Nick at Night is an accurate description of this scene. Nicodemus so often gets a bad rap for lots of reasons. But the first is typically because he comes to Jesus in darkness, which maybe was because he was kind of a big deal in religious and political leadership, and he didn't want people to know that he was there. But more likely, John is trying to indicate Nicodemus's relationship with Jesus. In John, that word darkness can sort of be used as code for not believing, for not trusting, for not being in relationship with Jesus. We heard it at the very beginning of the Gospel of John, right? Jesus, the light, shines in the darkness. So Nicodemus comes to Jesus, the light, but he doesn't seem to want to give up the cover of darkness either. He begins with a positive compliment to Jesus. He knows that Jesus is a teacher who has come from God because he's seen the signs that he's done. Now, this, of course, is only a partial truth. Nicodemus half gets it, because not only is God present with Jesus, Jesus is the very presence of God. But Jesus takes Nicodemus seriously enough to engage him in dialogue. He skips past the introductory small talk and gets right to the heart of it. You've got to start over, Nicodemus. You've got to be reborn. You've got to be born from above. You've got to become as vulnerable and dependent as a little child. You've got to let go of your social position and your achievements and your wealth and your reputation. You've got to let go of everything that you think makes you self-sufficient, because those are the things that prevent you from experiencing the wonder of the gift of God, that keep you from the gift of abundant life. That does not seem possible, Nicodemus replies. His words focus on the biological impossibility of convincing one's mother to allow you to crawl back in and do the birth all over again, right? But perhaps even as he said those words, his mind was spinning as he realized the implications of what Jesus was really saying. It sounds too difficult. It sounds too costly. How could he possibly do this? And Jesus says again, you've got to start over. Living water and the breath of the Spirit are here to give you this new life. You want everything to be concrete and clear, Nicodemus, but that's not how this works. Think of the wind. You don't know where the wind comes from or where it goes, but you experience the wind, right? So even if you can't comprehend the rebirth that comes through the Spirit from above, come, experience it. Come and see. And still, Nicodemus indicates he just doesn't know what Jesus was talking about. Jesus said, if I have told you earthly things and you do not believe, how can you believe if I tell you about heavenly things? I think part of the problem was probably the difference between what Jesus meant when he said believe and what Nicodemus meant by the same word. Barbara Bound-Taylor gives a great example on this. She says, on one level, to believe someone means simply to accept what that person says is true, usually on the basis of some evidence. Someone shows you a picture of himself climbing the rock face of a mountain and tells you it can be done. And you say, I believe you, right? You accept the proposition. You give your intellectual assent that a person can climb the face of a mountain, right? But it doesn't interfere with the way you live your life because because it's all in your head. But there's another level of belief that is much more visceral. Instead of showing you the pictures, someone invites you to go rock climbing with them. And as they check the knots on your harness and run your safety line through the carabiner around their own waist, they assure you that everything will be okay. And the proper response at that point is maybe not, I believe you, but I believe in you. Because you're way past anything like intellectual assent at that point, right? You've set yourself in relationship with this person, and you are trusting them with your life. The last words we hear from Nicodemus appear to be words of disbelief. How can these things be? He asks. But maybe these are the words of someone who is just starting to realize how much he doesn't know. Perhaps his falling silent was the moment that he began to reconsider everything he'd ever believed, everything he'd ever trusted in. Perhaps this is the beginning of a new path for Nicodemus. It's ambiguous. And Nicodemus disappears from the story at this point. Jesus keeps talking, and presumably Nicodemus heard these words, but he says no more. But this isn't the last of Nicodemus. A few chapters later, Jesus is at a festival, and he cries out, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me." And there's a crowd, and they start wondering, what is this about? And the crowd is divided. Is Jesus a prophet or not? And it says that some of the people wanted to arrest him at that point. But they didn't. And the temple police went back to the chief priests, and the chief priests asked them, "Why didn't you arrest him?" And the police said, no one's ever spoken like this before. We weren't sure. And they replied, well, surely you haven't been deceived by this too. None of us, the authorities here, none of us believe in him. And then John tells us Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus before and who was one of them. So Nicodemus is one of these powerful authorities here in this moment. Nicodemus asked, "Our law does not judge people without first giving them a hearing to find out what they are doing, does it?" Which for sure is a question that cuts to the heart of our world today. But we'll come back to that. He asked the question. We aren't going to judge people without giving them a hearing. And the other authorities say to Nicodemus, look, prophets don't come from Galilee. You know that. He's not a prophet. And that's it. Nicodemus disappears again. He asks a question that seems to provide a defense for Jesus. But again, it's so ambiguous. He's not saying anything about his own belief or his willingness to testify to that belief. He offers an interpretation of the law and nothing about who he thinks Jesus might be. And we see Nicodemus a third time in the Gospel of John, and this is in chapter 19. Jesus has died. And we read Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, although a secret one, because of his fear of the religious authorities, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. And Nicodemus, who had at first come to Jesus by night, we're reminded again who this guy is. Nicodemus also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. Now, that, by the way, would be enough to bury approximately 75 bodies. So an incredible amount of myrrh and aloes. And Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus took Jesus' body, wrapped it in cloth, and placed Jesus in a new tomb in a garden near the place where Jesus was crucified. Again, Nicodemus is in the dark. He was not the brave one to publicly ask for the body, but he did sneak out with an extravagant gift for the dead Jesus. He came to the light, But it seems it was too little, too late. And that's it. We have no idea what happens to Nicodemus after the resurrection. Perhaps he finally hooked on to the ropes and went mountain climbing with Jesus. Perhaps he was there to see the Son of God be lifted up, as Jesus had talked about that first day. But we don't know. On one hand, it's really hard to live in that place of not knowing how the story ends. But this story of Nicodemus having one foot in the darkness while still looking towards the light, I think can also resonate for us as well. When Jesus talks about judgment, right, he says the Son, God did not send the Son to condemn the world, but in order that we may be saved. And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and people love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. It's like we condemn ourselves when we turn towards darkness instead of light. But it's not like a permanent place to be, right? Like judgment here is kind of a liminal space. It's revealing a posture in relationship or in opposition to God. And people move in and out of this space as they see and hear and either trust or reject God. If we turn away from love and the source of love and light, we condemn ourselves to death and darkness. We are in a moment now in our lives, in our country, in our world, where I think each of us as individuals and all of us together in community are being called to turn towards love and toward the source of love and light. To continue to be in relationship with the one who loves the world so much, who desires eternal, abundant life for all, here and now. And it can be hard to know how to do that. I know our hearts are breaking with the news coming out of Minneapolis in what is clearly state-sanctioned murder. We're beyond a place of partisan politics and in a space that seems very uncertain as to what will happen next. Honestly, I think we can look to Nicodemus as an example, because what did Nicodemus do in those two scenes that I described? One, he called the leaders to do what they're supposed to do. He reminded them, this is what's supposed to happen here in our rule of law. Let's make sure we're doing things the right way. And Nicodemus also showed up to care for the victims of state-sanctioned violence in caring for Jesus the way that he did. Interestingly enough, those are two of the things that Dietrich Bonhoeffer called for when things started getting really difficult in Germany in the 30s. We as people of faith have work ahead of us, but it is not work that we will do alone, because the light shines in the darkness. The darkness does not overcome it. And we have a Savior who loves us so much to come to us and be with us and abide with us and walk with us through the messiness of our world. We may feel like Nicodemus, not sure where to place our feet, not even sure exactly where the light and the darkness are from minute to minute. But we can string our rope to Jesus as we climb these mountains and trust that Jesus will not let us fall, and that together we can continue to follow the light and the love that is being poured into our world through the grace upon grace of God. Thanks be to God. Amen.